With me, actually, kind of colleague since we got into the scene at the same time, and it's been a very long time in the making. And I'm very happy that you're taking the time. Zyori, thanks for being here. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well. I mean, I'm at the first Dota 2 Major. How bad could it be?
Absolutely. And you are here with your own crew as well. You started your own business, I guess, your own company, own brand.
Yep.
And you've been with Beyond the Summit before. So before we go into the event itself, that's something that I've been very interested in to hear about Moonduck TV. And is it Moonduck TV? Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Moonduck.tv, yeah.
And can you talk a bit about, just because it seemed like you were such an integral part of Beyond the Summit, you were doing all the hosting work, did such a great job at that as well. And then we got the news, we saw this very relaxed video of you and LD sitting together, reminiscing about the past.
Hey, Merlini was there too. Don't forget about Merlini.
Were you sitting there in the jogging pants, or was it just Merlini, like all casual? I know we were talking about
Merlini, yeah, super casual, yeah.
So walk us through a bit about your past few weeks, maybe months of Beyond the Summit. What was going through your mind, and how did that project come into being?
Well, Moonduck, you mean? Yeah. So after I left BTS, I was really nervous about finding people to collaborate with, because the way the esports scene is, it's very easy to, you have to kind of ride the momentum. It's easy to fall out of favor if you don't do anything for a while. So it was kind of a risk, though. I knew it was time to find something else to work on. So Sunsfan was actually the one that approached me with the whole idea for Moonduck, and it was basically that there's this pool of talent that are working a lot and pretty popular, but aren't really assigned to a studio, like Purge or Syndra and myself, Sunsfan, OD Pixel, Mott, all these kind of people. And the idea was, well, there's all these people that are freelancing, and when you're freelance, you're always kind of the lowest on the totem pole. There's a tournament, the tournament organizer outsources it to a studio, the studio decides the scope of how they want to broadcast it, who they want to involve, and then you're invited, and you basically get to say, yes, I accept the contract, or no, I don't. So the idea was, well, we can bring all these talented people together, start our own studio, and then together we can create something that's bigger than the sum of its parts. And then as we sort of talked about it more and realized that pretty much everyone, except for a couple, have other projects outside of just the studio. For example, Draskell has his stream, Sunsfan owns a team, Purge has a YouTube channel, that kind of stuff. We wanted to do something a little bit different, and instead of having everyone go all in on the studio and put the studio first, we wanted to do this hybrid idea of creating a studio that's also kind of an agency, where when it makes sense, we all come together and work on a tournament. We can work under our umbrella to bid for tournament contracts and kind of create our own identity, but at the same time we don't want to bottleneck people and say you can't work for BTS or join Dota because you're Moonduck only. We want to enable all the people that are under our brand to work as many events as they can, make as much money as they can, and do as much Dota as they can.
So essentially, would the description from a layman's perspective be accurate, that this is kind of the pendant of people coming together, the kind of agency alliance that Zero Gravity formed? So is it kind of similar in regards to talent, where you just kind of have a bigger name that is able to perhaps get better terms and conditions for events?
Well, that part of it is probably the only commonality. The zero gravity thing, you're referring to the players union that the players didn't know about, the big team org unions that really just only benefits the team orgs and the owners. Yeah, that thing's a bunch of bullshit. That is, I don't want to be compared to that, because I have a very negative association with that whole.
Can you elaborate on that a bit? Like what is really grinding your gears about that?
Well, the fact that it was presented as kind of a players union and the players had no part in it. That is a big red flag to me. I would mark that under as kind of false advertising. I also just didn't really care for the tone of the message that was said about putting these demands down of things. We will not attend any event unless it has a LAN, and it's like, well, it's good that some tournaments are online only. And I mean, what's bad about a $200,000 Captain's Draft tournament that doesn't have a LAN? A lot of things that teams liked about Captain's Draft 2.0 was that it was a high prize pool, it was a fun tournament, and they didn't have to travel to another LAN. So some of it just seemed very contradictory from the information I've heard firsthand from a lot of players about issues with the scene and burnout with traveling and all that kind of stuff. And there were just a lot of other things in there that I thought were unrealistic, and the demands were very clearly presented from we're only thinking about our own perspective kind of perspective. It wasn't, a lot of the demands are just not realistic for the vast majority of tournaments.
Okay, so understood. It's more about you guys are getting together. You do try to get better terms than that bottom of the totem pole you were talking about, but it's not something that gets priority over things that players are doing themselves beforehand. It's just kind of a more loose kind of agreement.
Yeah, I mean, it's also apples and oranges a little bit comparing players and casters. It's just a completely different arena. So, I mean, there are some similarities in the sense that, yeah, we collaborate and we were individuals coming together gives us a little bit more power to say, hey, this tournament that would normally choose between, BTS or join Dota, well, now you have an alternative. If you like our talent or, like our brand and what we do, now you have a third choice in that arena. So, and it seemed like there are a lot of tournaments in Dota right now, and more than BTS could cover or just join Dota could cover. So it seems like a good time to, have a new group of casters.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And could you talk a bit about, was there any specific events that occurred that led to you leaving Beyond the Summit? What was the story there?
It was a lot of things, some that I can talk about, some that I can't talk about. I think the biggest thing was really just burnout. And it was both a blessing and a curse working for BTS. When I moved out to the studio at the beginning of 2014, I was still fairly green in the Dota space, so I didn't really know that many players. I was still a fairly amateur caster by most metrics. So being thrown into that environment kind of power farmed my Dota knowledge, One of the things about BTS that's really cool but also difficult is it's really intense. Everybody that lives there is not from that area. So everyone's kind of relocated to this place in Southern California. So the byproduct is, you work Dota, you talk Dota for fun, you hang out, and there's no, I don't have any friends in Southern California. Everybody just kind of stays in the house a lot, and it's really intense. I kind of felt like I never really got a break. There wasn't a very clear clock in, clock out. We always kept ourselves busy. There was always something you could be working on, and it was kind of on you as an individual to say, okay, I've worked too much this week. I need a day off. You sort of had to say that and make it clear, and it was very far from that classic 9-to-5 type work environment. So it was really good. I learned a lot, and being one of the one of 4 key people in the summits 1, 2, and 3 was just unbelievably valuable experience for me as a person. That's like one of those jobs doing like a live event management where no one will hire you if you don't have experience, and it's kind of impossible to start if you don't have any experience. So it was really awesome to be able to break into that environment with a group of people that basically said, hey, this is a learning experience for all of us. We're all going to mess up somewhere along the line. Let's not focus on the things that we messed up in like a reprimand sense, but focus on learning something from this, preventing it from happening again, and always bettering our product. So it was an environment where it really was a learning experience for everybody. So there are a lot of benefits to that really intense work environment, but I was really ready for a change. I also I have a degree in business, and I want to own something. At BTS I was just a salaried employee, and not unique to BTS. I don't think I'll ever really be satisfied just being an employee at a company, at least not in the long term. I really want to be able to know that if I bust my ass and work 80 hours a week, I scale proportionally with how the business scales. So the way my career was going, it felt like a good time to try and make that change.
Well, that sounds very reasonable. And talking about how the scene is developing and you making that move also to just evolve further. Develop further. How is the scene right now in terms of its economics? I mean, we have the major system now going on. Many people don't really have insight into the business aspect of things. ESL is doing this over here now in Europe. Please share your thoughts on just the new system and the Dota 2 economy in general right now.
I think overall it's a good change. There are a lot of drawbacks to having just one giant fuck-all tournament for the year. $15 million at one time of the year, and then everything else is just sort of a free-for-all with all these small tournaments. A lot of instability. Rosters are all over the place. It's difficult, and I think having the big money in terms of 7-figure plus prize pools spread out throughout the year just helps create more stability. And for the players, it makes it more of like a career choice where there are a lot of reasons to play throughout the year rather than just go really crazy for TI, get burned out, take a month off, and then repeat that whole cycle. I think it makes it easier for everyone. Right now is an interesting time because it's the first major. It's a learning experience for Valve. It's a learning experience for all of us as we make this adjustment. So there's obviously a lot of road bumps. It's still kind of unclear, like what were the tier 1 tournaments, like the Summit, like Captain's Draft. There are others that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, but the 6-figure plus prize pools, Dota Pit, for example, that relied heavily on in-game cosmetics, compendiums in some cases, and crowdfunding. I think that business model is going to have to change, because now there are so many other ways for viewers and consumers in the Dota space to spend money. You could buy all of the compendiums for the majors and TI and a little bit here and there, and I think for the average Dota consumer, that's probably close to your budget for the year of what you're used to spending. So it makes it more difficult for the third parties to run these big tournaments that have in the past raised really an absurd amount of money for these tournaments. So that's going to be a big adjustment. Yeah. But
sorry, if I can just go in there and ask a follow-up question. So if the system just stays like that people they go to their budgets in terms of spending on the consumer side, and that would in turn eliminate the tournaments you were just talking about. You just mentioned that they contribute a lot to the growth of Dota, and this is why things need to change a little bit. And this is actually a topic, the cosmetics, how those things function, how they benefit certain tournaments, and how like also cosmetics can kind of move up into maybe a certain certain tournament. That's something that gets discussed a lot. What is that the better way to say something needs to change, or is that just the natural progression of the economy?
Well, I think it's kind of both. I don't think those tournaments will go away. I think some of them will, some of the ones that were truly reliant on that crowdfunding. I think something like the Summit 4, the Summit 5, to me it feels pretty safe because it's a very unique idea. It brings something to the table that no other tournament does. And more importantly, players want to play the Summit. We spend a lot of time creating an environment of we're going to make sure they're really well taken care of, they're well fed, all of the accommodations are handled. I don't know if things have changed since I've left at the Summit 4, but the model was always to make the best experience possible for the players. So I think tournaments like that will stand apart and continue to be fine. And there is a point of diminishing returns for tournaments. Once you get into that $150,000, $200,000 prize pool range, crowdfunding another $100,000 it doesn't add that much. You need to sort of hit that threshold of around $100,000 to $250,000, and then you're pretty good. The difference between that and a $500,000 tournament, if you can get the tier 1 teams there, you've still got an A-class tournament that teams want to participate in.
All right, since we're at the Frankfurt Major, I do got to ask you about what team you're rooting for, and following kind of the storyline, if there's anything in particular or any team in particular that you would like to see win this thing.
Yeah, as a caster, I generally try to remain unbiased. I feel like I've trained myself to come to these events and not cheer for one team in particular, but there's definitely a soft spot in my heart for the EG guys, mostly just because I'm an American and it was really cool to see a North American team win TI5. It's hard to not kind of root for them a little bit, though they are the front runners. The real storyline that I've been following is Vega. That's a team that stood out to me as kind of my dark horse coming into this event. Nobody was completely sold after ESL One New York. Was that a one-off event, or are they really a top-tier team now? And for me, it was just incredible that they stuck through after TI5 and that really demoralizing experience. I think what really separates the true top-tier teams from the teams that are very skilled and can compete in that arena are the ones that can look at losses and take some emotion out of it and find a way to move on constructively. For Vega, they qualify for the wild card TI5, they don't make it into the main event, and they have to sit there and watch all of their colleagues play in the event for huge, huge money. And I think most teams would just be demoralized and give up after that. And the fact that they stuck through and then came back and won the first big LAN after TI via just the qualifier is an incredible storyline for me. And I love that it speaks to that idea that there's value in sticking together and working through those hard times. I think that's when you learn the most, when you're really up against a wall and you're in those hard times. If you can push through that experience is just so valuable. So I really like watching the Vega guys. I also just like their play style. They're really that classic aggressive CIS Dota, and now that they've learned to kind of check that aggression, I think they found a good happy medium of making games exciting but not going too ham.
Absolutely, and there you go. So it feels like the way that Vega is performing, sticking together, may just be that character